Okay.
The next talks will be from Ms. Cvetana Krstev. It's a very hot and important topic. A myriad of ways to say wear a mask.
Yes.
Yes, Ms. Krstev.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I will, okay, present, as you see here, present our research. Okay, thank you. Our research in word and image. Well, when we prepared this paper, we thought that at the present moment, we will talk about something that happened in the past and that it's over, but unfortunately, it's not over. The virus is still present, but the measures are much more relaxed. Well, we can discuss why are they much more relaxed, but they are. So you can see that some premises have crossed the previous message just to show that it's not important, or there are a lot of forgotten notices that nobody takes care about them anymore. Well, what would be the outline of our talk? What type of short messages are we talking about? About our tiny little corpus? What syntax and lexica are used in these messages? How can we generate this myriad of mask messages? What sentiment do they convey? And then we'll give some conclusions. What types of short messages are this? Today's short messages are very popular for natural language processing, but usually SMS messages, Twitter, and so on are the most popular. But there are different type of messages from those that we are talking about. They are about different topics. And among those that want to use SMS and Twitter, while our messages, you can't avoid them, because if you want to enter certain premises, you have to see the message. The graffiti are more like our messages, because they also are on the street and you have to see them if you want or don't want, but they are on different topics. But what is more like our messages are Christmas, New Year, birthday messages, because they always convey the same meaning, but in a different way. But they are different from ours because they are not public, they are very personal. So our messages are on the specific topic and they are very publicly made. Well, there are also graffiti that are talking about what we are talking about, as you can see here, and translated to English. And these graffiti, we always think that they are one way, the message is going one way, but you see that there is also feedback, because these two messages have been crossed. And this can go on several times. So it is a kind of verbal war in Belgrade today about this topic and, of course, many other topics. Well, something about this corpus is based on notices that were photographed between these two dates. And we took as a single notice everything that was written on one sheet of paper. We filtered only those that were different from all notices that we photographed. And of course, it is not representatives, since all notices were photographed in the center of Belgrade, where we moved during this time when we didn't use the public transportation. So it was the total number of 231 notices. So something about their characteristics, their physical appearance. Some were printed and some were handwritten. Most of them were printed, as you can see. For capitalization, a lot of notices used only capital letters, probably just to be more visible. And others used both lower level and mixed letters. As for script, there were used Latin script and Cyrillic script. As you can see, although Cyrillic is the official alphabet of Serbian, but much more often the Latin script was used, and among them were a lot of those with without diacritics also. A lot of emphasizing in various ways. For instance, we can see bold font, underlying images, and then we can see colors, images, and so on. Even different languages, we see English and Chinese. English, it was on the same sheet of paper, and you think that one is the translation of the other, but it's not the case. It's two different precautions actually. And what is this in Chinese? I suppose it's something about masks because it's on the same sheet of paper. Well, something about the content of the notices. They're talking about actually 4 protective measures. Wearing a mask, that is one, most often used. Then number of persons that can be allowed on the premises. Then keeping the distance, and then disinfection. So here we see one of the notices that used all 4 of those measures, but they used 1 or 2, or it depends. As for the length of notices, average number is 14 words per notice, but as you can see, the most of them are actually very short. And then they usually have additional parts, not only this prescriptive measure, but some additional parts, something to attract the attention and address those who enter, poštovani, respected. Then you have invoking authorities very often, and often very long explanation. So who is responsible for this measure? In this case, the government of Serbia itself was responsible. Then expressing the gratitude, here it was not present. Then it was miscellaneous, saying, please respect this because it is very good for all of us, and so on. And the signature. Then it comes the prescription itself. Here it says that precisely 10,386 persons can be allowed in this building. As for lexica used, it is nothing very unusual and that won't be expected. Mask, wearing, gratitude, entering, facility for nouns, to request, to permit, to can, to wear, to keep for verbs. For adjectives, mandatory, protective, respected, other, maximal. And for adverbs, mandatorily, simultaneously, maximally, at least, at the most. Some synonyms were used also. So for mask, there were also what was used, protective mask very often, with additional personal protective mask, then hygienic mask, and then face masks or maska za lice. This should be distinguished from saying wear the mask on a face. It looks similar, but it's not the same. It wants to say that you should wear your mask on the face. Well, we can ask ourselves, where else could we wear a mask? But who says that the masks are not very useful? So you can use them for different purposes. The length of precisely masked messages is on the average 6 words, 74 words. And there is the minimum is 1 word and the maximum 27. And how can a message be 1 word long? Well, it was the word mandatorily written actually on a mask. And what was the syntactic structure of mask messages? The most of mask messages have one of the 9 basic structures. So over 90% of all messages use one of these structures. These basic structures were: mask is mandatory, wearing a mask is mandatory, wear a mask, we entreat you to wear a mask, to wear a mask, and then with additional something, customers are required to wear a mask, entry without a mask is prohibited, entry allowed with a mask, and please enter with a mask or do not enter without a mask. If you look at one of those types, type 2, wearing a mask is mandatory. It is just a basic structure, but this structure can be used in different ways. So if we make a finite state automata or a graph for this structure, we obtain something like this: nošenje maske je obavezno. But then this is just a basic structure. For instance, this auxiliary can be skipped. It's not necessarily there. Then some of these parts can be, some synonyms can be used. For instance, nošenje, korišćenje, and then masks, as I said, can be zaštitna, higijenska, za lice, and so on. Then if we add some more synonyms, then it's a different grammatic gender, so you have to have a new path for that. And then, of course, because the free order is allowed in Serbian, then you can make the free order of to make the different types. So to put to adjective at the beginning or at the end. And then here there is the final graph where you have additional parts saying that when you enter, you have to wear the mask, or in this object, you have to wear the mask, and so on. And then, just to see, using this graph as I presented in the previous slide, this same graph can be used to analyze messages to see if they can capture all the syntactic structures actually used in the notices, but they can be also used, the very same graphs, to generate all possible messages. So from this, just to I cannot find now the, can you help me? I've lost the next, and then here I can show the small film. Here, just okay. So you see here some of the generated messages, and you can see that only these type 2 messages can generate really a myriad of messages which are all syntactically correct. And something to add something about sentiment values of mask messages. Well, messages using zabranjeno, it is forbidden, of course, they are the most strict messages. So if the word forbidden in various ways presented is present, then it is a very strict message. If the message is using imperative mood, it is also very strict. Stavite masku, ne ulazite bez maske. Then you have the neutral messages. You can't say whether they are very strict or not. Maska je obavezna, just a statement. Well, if you add the word please, then as soon as you add the word please, then the message becomes polite and not very strict. But if you use it with the imperative mood, molimo, nosite masku, it is still not, it is still quite strict. But if you address person if you address person directly or indirectly, then it can be much more polite. If you address indirectly, like molimo kupce da nose masku, indirectly, it's still very polite, but the most polite, the most trying to make the customers to really use these masks, it's addressing directly, like molimo vas da nosite masku. Of course, there are always new forms, there are always new forms of messages that you cannot think about. For instance, here you see the message where you know that the person who was working in this shop was really very, very angry, getting very angry. And he says, don't ask if you can enter without the message because you can't. So it is very strict, and I simply don't know if what was the result of this kind of a message. And what can I say about the conclusion? Well, our next step will be to the production of paraphrase sentences with full morphosyntactic description, because it is possible with these graphs that we produced. Besides that, we will analyze in the similar way messages about other prescriptive measures that I already mentioned. And also we will collect other public announcements that emerge spontaneously and convey similar meaning. For instance, here you see very different messages, not only about COVID, but about entering with dogs, eating, not smoking, not wearing guns and other weapons, and so on. And thank you for wearing a mask.